Hey everyone, it's Dr. Baird out of All Performance Healthcare. Today we're going over how to perform the squat movement. So we teach the squat to most people that come in here because it is such an important movement and it's a great indicator and way to improve full body functional movement. So when we're learning this movement, there are a few things to consider, which we're going to cover in this video. So very first thing to understand, the difference between a hinge and a squat. So again, a hinge movement, what we're really focusing on is reaching our hips back. With the squat, it's about bringing those hips down to the mat. So it's not back like a hinge, it's down in a squat. The next thing to keep in mind is when we initiate the squat movement, we need to initiate it by what we call unlocking at the hips. So what I mean by that first movement needs to be sending the hips back, and then it's okay to drop down into the squat. What we don't want to do, and what we see a lot of people do when we're learning this movement, is it's unlocking at the knees. And so what I mean by that, what that looks like is, again, that first movement isn't at the hips like that, it's bending at the knees like that, and coming straight down there. That already puts a lot of pressure on my ankles. If I'm having knee pain, it's a lot more pull on the front of the knees. So when you're squatting, make sure that that first movement is sending the hips back, then bringing the hips down. Now the next thing we want to consider is our stance. So a lot of people, when they're learning to squat, however long ago, this is how I was taught to squat, is that it's always hip width, feet pointed forward. And then from there, you just squat down. What they've been finding is that everybody's hip anatomy is shaped a little different, which is going to give them their unique stance. So what we want to do is figure out what your unique stance is. So the two things you consider in terms of stance is, one, how wide do you go? And then the second is, how much toe turnout do you have? And so with this one, there's no real exact science. It's really kind of trial and error and finding what feels best for you. So the two things you kind of look for are, one, what feels best, but the other thing is like how low. So you want to find the stance that kind of allows you to get the lowest. So I'll kind of demonstrate. So again, if I do the hip width, toes pointed forward, if I squat down, I get stuck. I can feel kind of pain in my ankles and in my knees, but really this is as low as I could go. So through experimentation, what I found is, again, my body really likes a more narrow stance with my toes pointed out, almost like 45 degrees. And so what you'll be able to tell is when I'm in that position, I can immediately get lower to the ground, and it's a lot more comfortable. It's less stress on my ankle joint, less stress on my knee joint, on my hip joint, on my back. So when we're performing the squat, we're gonna, one, make sure we're unlocking at the hips. Two, figure out our stance. So again, how wide do we need to go? How far do our toes need to turn out? And again, that's a personal preference, whatever feels best for you. And the third thing to watch out for, again, usually people that are on the more mobile side, is how low you go. So when I teach this movement, I usually have people stop when their thighs here are parallel with the ground. Now I can go lower, but you can see what starts to happen as I start to go too low is my pelvis really starts to rock under me, which again is just an unstable position for the spine, which if we're somebody who's worried about back pain, knee pain, anything like that, it is something that we want to avoid. So those are the three things to consider when learning how to perform the air squat. We'll let you kind of try that at home and let me know how it goes. Thanks for watching.